Welcome to today's session, everyone. My name is Trinity, and I'm a member of Pre-Med CC, a student-led organization that was established in fall of 2021. Our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians. We know how challenging finding mentorship can be, and we wanted to change that. And while we had advertised our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to anyone who wants to join. So you can join us from the comfort of your own home or wherever you happen to be. And that's what makes it so accessible. The best thing about our usual times are Wednesdays in the summer from 5 to 6:30 PST and occasionally on Saturdays as well. So just be sure to check out our website to know when the next events are. They do switch during the school year probably, so just keep an eye on that. And after you've attended our session today, make sure to go onto our website and take the quiz that pertains to the session that you're attending today. And if you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you will get credit for the hours that you've put in listening to our presentation. And like I said earlier, to stay up to date on all of our upcoming events and other things we're offering, be sure to follow us at PreMedCC on all of the social media platforms you see here. And now I'm going to hand it over to Giselle for intro.
Hello everyone, my name is Giselle. I'm also part of the Pre-Med CC team, and it is with great pleasure that I introduce Jen, who is a medical student at Pacific Northwest at the age of 51. As a lifelong learner, she has completed 2 master's degrees in education and nutrition and worked in the field of autism research and advocacy before taking her pre-med requirements at a local community colleges and turning her sights on a career as a doctor of osteopathic medicine. When not in school, Jen divides her time between her family's farm on the Washington coast and traveling the country with her husband and college-age twin boys on the family's converted school bus. After graduation, Jen hopes to work as both a physician and a university educator. You can follow along with Jen's story on Instagram and TikTok at the.docrow.2.doctor.jen. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So I thought I would start by telling everybody just a little bit about my journey, or kind of why my page is called The Road to Dr. Jen, sort of the road that led me here. I was raised in a very academic family. My father was a college professor and then a dean subsequently. He was a mathematics genius. He actually wrote math textbooks. And when I was in college, I had friends who would be like, "Can you explain this to me?" And I'm like, "No, I don't understand it. That's my dad." But it was always in my head that I would do something sciencey because my dad was such a math whiz, and I thought, this is going to be my niche. And I remember as a little girl drawing pictures of myself in a tutu and a white coat, saying that I was going to be a ballerina doctor. And I'm short and I have weak ankles, so the ballerina thing was out the window. So I thought I'd focus on the doctor piece. Unfortunately, I had the experience of going to grade school in the 70s and high school in the 80s when teachers were not necessarily as supportive and as politically correct as I'm happy to see they are now. I was told from a very early age that girls were not good at math, even though I thought I was. I was told repeatedly that I wasn't. I had an experience in high school when I walked into a chemistry class and was told that all the girls needed to sit in the back because we didn't understand chemistry anyway, so we'd just be wasting his time. Unfortunately, that went on fairly commonly to the point that I started to just question myself. You know, if you're told often enough that the sky is green, you start to see the sky is green. And being told repeatedly that I wasn't good at math and I wasn't good at science had me believing that I truly wasn't. So I started to do poorly in those classes. And then I started just stopping taking those classes altogether. I had a very brief experience when I thought in college that I would take a botany class because I was like, well, I still like science, even though I'm not good at it. I thought I'll take this one. This will be a good experience. And was told within the first 2 weeks by the professor, who said, I wish that I could give 2 lectures, one for the boys and one for the girls, because then I could dumb it down for the girls. So I received a message pretty loud and clear for a good 20 years that math and science were not a place for women. I graduated with just a very generic liberal arts degree, and absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life, because everything that I'd always thought that I wanted to do and that I thought I was good at, I was told repeatedly that I was not. I felt very lost. I bumped around kind of from job to job, not sure what I wanted to do with my life. And unfortunately, what is very, very common with a lot of women who don't know what they want to do with their life, it's not uncommon that we fall into situations where we find men who say, I'm more than happy to make all of your decisions for you, which is exactly what happened. I was married to a man that was more than happy to make all of the decisions and more than happy to remind me that I wasn't capable of doing so. We had 2 kiddos. I have twin boys now. They are 19. When they were about 5 years old, we got divorced. One of my boys has autism, and I was given the message that I didn't sign up for this. So he left, which was just as well. But then I had the very singular experience of being a single mother with 2 kiddos, one with special needs, and no work experience and no marketable education. It was a very, very scary time for us. We were on public assistance for quite a while, just trying to get our feet back under us. I managed to find a wonderful women's organization, and one of my son's teachers who said, I think you'd be very good working with kiddos with autism. And my organization, we provide scholarships for women. They provided me with a very nice scholarship to go back and get my master's degree in special education. I chose to focus on the research piece. The university where I got my master's gave you an option of either a research route or an in-class teacher route. I chose to go the research route, and mostly just because of my son. I wanted to find out everything I could. I wanted to help him the best I could. And you know, when they say that the therapies he needs are $150 an hour and you can't afford groceries and insurance doesn't cover it, I thought the best way to help him would be to learn it myself. And it actually turned into an absolute love of learning. So I started working after graduation at an autism research institute and traveling the I-5 corridor everywhere from Southern Oregon up to the Canada border, working with kiddos with autism, working mostly in rural and underserved communities, working with families that didn't have access to treatment, that didn't have access to diagnosis, that didn't have access to services. And we brought those services to them as part of our project. And that was absolutely amazing and rewarding. But as happens often when you're working in university-based research projects and research organizations, the grant money runs out. And I then found myself out of a job again. The hardest part, honestly, was seeing all the families that were no longer getting services. So that was pretty heartbreaking. So I started working for another organization doing advocacy for children with autism and their families. And as part of that, I began working with one of the local hospitals in town and talking with a lot of the physicians up there about the different work they were doing with genetics and the biomedical aspects of neurological conditions with kiddos. I got very fascinated in that. That was also around the time that I met an absolutely amazing man who is now my husband. And we got married. started to see what living in the city was doing to myself and was doing to the boys. And we decided we didn't want to live like that anymore. So we both took our jobs fully online and got some property out on the Washington coast and started a little farm out there. So we lived on the farm and we're working from home and homeschooling the boys, and started talking about, you know, what we were going to do when the boys went off to college. And my husband said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I suppose I'll just keep doing what I've always done. And he said, what did you want to be when you grew up? What did you want to do when you were a little girl? And I said, well, I wanted to be a ballerina. He's like, yeah, no, that ship has sailed. What else? I was like, it's stupid. And he's like, no. And I was like, yeah, I wanted to be a doctor. And he was like, cool, be a doctor. And I was like, at that time I was 46, 47. And I was like, I'm 47. He's like, yeah, no, I'm aware of how old you are, but do you want to be a doctor? And I was like, but I'm going to have to take prerequisites. He's like, well, take them. Like, there's this test and it's called the MCAT and I'm going to have to, and he's like, so take it. I was like, you realize that I'm going to be like, by the time I finish residency and like fellowships, I said, I'm going to be close to like 60 years old. And he's like, I'm like 90% sure that you're going to be 60 anyway. So why not be 60 and be a doctor? And for every reason that I put up there why I couldn't do it, he just kept like smacking them down. Of course, we were living in a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. There were no colleges really nearby or accessible. I think the closest university was about 3-4 hours away. So I started looking into how I could complete the prerequisites. And I spoke to some pre-med advisors at the closest university and said, I'm not there, but I need to know kind of what do we do for those of us who don't live nearby? And they put me in touch with some different universities that offered online courses that I could take that did not require me to be on campus, that still gave you the full prereqs and the lab credits. And would you like the names of those? Would that be helpful to put in here? Would that be something that would be useful?
Sure, I'll put them in, yeah.
Okay, great. Oregon State University has a lot of science classes, a lot of science coursework with lab that you can take fully online. Another excellent one, the Community College of Colorado system. There's several branches, Community College of Aurora, Community College of Denver. I took the bulk of my science credits at the community colleges of Colorado, and they're all available online, which was absolutely outstanding. And I made sure that these would all be accepted. And that's something that I want to really remind people of. I know I've talked to a lot of people who have said, I'm concerned because my prereqs are, you know, I have my biology from here, and I have my chemistry from here, and I have my physics from here. Schools don't care. They don't care where the prerequisites came from. They just want to know that you took them. They're not going to care. I probably had 7 transcripts when all was told, between undergrad, graduate, and all of the places I had to kind of patchwork to take my prerequisites. Completely okay. Schools don't care. They just want to know that you took the prerequisites, that you took the labs, and that you passed them. So if you have that fear that they're going to be overwhelmed by multiple transcripts, and they're not. They see it all the time. Perfectly okay. So that took me probably 2.5 years to kind of pick at a lot of those, because I had some science credits from before, but I had also taken like 3 gap decades since my undergrad. So they were really expired. So that was how I took care of my prerequisites, was the online college systems. The University of New England, also in Maine, they have fabulous online courses. I know a lot of people who used UNE for their credits all online. They have they have like a whole packet available now, I believe, that gives you sort of the rundown of everything you'll need for pre-med, and they've got it all locked in one little curriculum that you can do fully online.
Which one was it again?
The University of New England in Maine.
Cool.
That's a really good one. And then studying for the MCAT, that's a different experience when you're doing it as a non-traditional student who isn't actively in college at the time. I know a lot of pre-med programs at universities will have MCAT prep sort of embedded in their curriculum. I obviously didn't have that. So I did a lot of, I used Princeton Review videos. I used a lot of Kaplan books. Kaplan books are great, and you can get them from the library. Like, you don't even have to buy these, or you go on Amazon. There's always people selling used Kaplan books. Like, trust me, when we're done with our MCAT, we want those books out of our house. So we are like, you can find them. Another really good place to look for them is if you have a university in your town that has a science department, they almost always have those racks of free books outside the library or outside of med school. If you know one, look for those racks of free books. Med students are always putting their MCAT books on there to be grabbed when they're done, because you don't want to look at them ever again when you're done. So those are a great way to find good books there. I really like the Kaplan ones. There are some terrific programs online. Medschoolcoach.com has some really good MCAT resources and free full-length exams. Khan Academy, you know, that one that all our kids used for math and science when they were in school. Khan Academy has great MCAT resources, and they are all free. So it is possible to study for and prep for your MCAT on your own. I did it myself. We did it on a cross-country trip in our school bus. My husband has pictures of me state to state, you know, with my books and my videos. And so you absolutely can do all of this. You don't have to spend $5,000 on an MCAT prep course. You don't. It is completely possible to study for the MCAT on a budget and do it successfully. It really is. So I completed my MCAT. This was all during the height of COVID. So everything was masked, and when interviews started rolling around, they were all online. So when I was applying to schools, I had no way to tour them. I was having to look at pictures online, virtual tours. All of our interactions with students and faculty, they were all online. So all of my interviewing and my interactions were completely like we're doing now on Zoom, which I think we've all gotten to kind of be experts about. And, you know, one thing I would say to a lot of non-trads is to not think that that's going to hold you back from getting interviews, that it's not going to keep you from standing out. If anything, I think non-traditional students stand out more. It's very common. You'll see, we kind of have this vision in our mind of the typical medical student who's, you know, 23 years old, thus and such, from so-and-so background, just came right out of a 4-year biology degree, worked as a scribe, shadowed, like the standard block. If that's not you, that's fine. If that is you, that's fine. But as a non-traditional student, I think what I see a lot of is people who think I have to hide the fact that I'm older, or I have to hide the fact that I took a lot of my credits at a community college, or I have to hide that. No, don't. Like, my biggest advice is find the thing that makes you non-traditional. Is it your culture? Is it your heritage? Is it your age? Do you live in a treehouse? Did you take 5 gap years to teach yoga in Ecuador? Someone I know who did that. Focus on that. Like, make sure, put that at the forefront, write that in your personal essay. Like, find the thing that makes you stand out, kind of your niche. What makes you marketable? What makes you different? Because schools love that. Schools absolutely love non-traditional students. I mean, it's great that you scribed. It's great that you have X number of hours of clinical experience. It's great that you had a blank, blank, blank on your MCAT. That is awesome. I'm not downplaying that. But what else are you? Who else are you? Schools want to see that. They want to see what makes you different. They want to see what makes you unique, because one of the biggest things that you see as a risk for medical students and that you see for practicing physicians is burnout. Burnout is for real. Your first year will hit you like a Mack truck. You've got to have something else in your arsenal. You've got to have something outside of medical school. If your whole life has been nothing but just prepping for this one moment, you're going to sit down in an interview and they're going to look at you and say, so what do you like to do on the weekends? And you better have a better answer than study or volunteer at the clinic. They want to hear about, oh, what do you like to do? Oh, God, one guy I know, and he delivered singing telegrams. And that's what he did during his gap year. He ran around and delivered singing telegrams. I have another one who worked as a Disney princess at Disney World. The one about the person who lived in a treehouse, legit. This guy took 2 gap years and he and his wife built a treehouse in the middle of, it was like right on the outside of like the Olympic National Forest. And they lived in a tree for 2 years because why not? Find those things that you think are just a little like, who's gonna, no, emphasize that, because they want to see that you have a life outside of med school. Because if you have a life outside of medical school, you are so much less likely to burn out. You are so much less likely to. The people who are melting down in the library or crying outside of the building are not the ones that are mountain biking on the weekend. They are not the ones that run an online organic cookie company. That's another person I know in med school. They're not the ones that have an outlet other than school, because if you make school and you make med school your entire life and your entire identity, A, you're not going to stand out, and B, you're going to burn out hard. So your non-traditional piece, whatever that is your strength. It's your superpower. It's your thing that makes you special, because they're going to get a stack of applications that thick. Well, I guess not, because they're all online anymore, but you get the visual. They're going to get a stack of that thick of people who look exactly alike. Be the one that's different. I have a guy in admissions, and he always, like, every time I see him, he laughs. And he's always like, Jen, every time I see you, I totally remember how you were on a game show and you told me about how, like, when you were on that game show that one time, all this stuff. And it's like, which has nothing to do with medicine, but it was unique, and he remembered it. So you always try to find something that's unique. Bring it out in your personal statement. Bring it out in your interview, and be prepared for questions in your interview. They're going to ask you certain things that might relate to your non-traditional status. Why did you take 2 gap years, or 30 in my case? Be prepared to talk about that. If you had struggles academically, they will ask you about it. Be prepared to talk about it. We have some people who have things on their record from their past. It's going to show up. It didn't keep them out of medical school. Be okay talking about it. It's okay. We've all had a life, especially some of us who've been on the planet for half a century. To expect that I have nothing in my past that I'm upset about or disappointed in would be ridiculous. We've all got something. They will find something on your interview. They will find the C you got in that class, or they will find something that you have on your record, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They will see a class you failed and had to retake. Whatever that thing is that you're so worried they're going to find out about, stop worrying. They're going to find out about it. Like, they are 100%. They're going to know about it. So own it. I always use the example of that movie Pitch Perfect, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And then there's that character Fat Amy, and she always says, I call myself Fat Amy, so you twig bitches won't do it behind my back. So be like Fat Amy, find your thing and own it. Absolutely own it. When they say, would you like to tell me about this? Say, absolutely. This is what happened. And biggest advice, do not play the blame game. Don't ever say, oh, well, I failed that class because my professor was a jerk, or this happened because of so-and-so, or thus and such. Own it. Own it. Because they know that you're not perfect. They're not perfect. They've got stuff in their past too. Everybody has something. Own it. Take responsibility for it. They are not calling this out in your interview because they're trying to trap you. They're not doing it because they're trying to upset you. They're not doing it because they're trying to make you feel bad about something. They're doing it because they want to see how you handle pressure. And there's a lot of pressure in medical school. And there's even more when you're a physician. And they want to know that you can handle pressure situations and you can turn a negative into a positive. So if somebody asks you, I see you got a D in organic chemistry. Yes, I did. I really struggled with that course. It had been a long time since I'd taken chemistry. So I did struggle with that one. So I made a point of going to my professor and speaking to my professor. I spent several office hours. I got a tutor. I went and I did this and explain everything you did and then show your success at the end. And then I retook the course. And as you can see, I got a B. So they're okay with dings in your past. You know, oh, I see that, you know, I spoke to someone who said, you know, I'm scared to death. I had a shoplifting thing on my record. And they addressed it. And he said, yeah, it was a stupid fraternity prank. And this is what happened. And this is what I did to make an amends after the fact. And this is how I paid it back and how I fixed it. And now I work with kids who are making bad decisions like I did. And, you know, he showed, he didn't try to deny it. He didn't try to place blame. He owned it and he showed how he turned it into a positive. That's what they want to see. And that's a big one for a lot of non-traditional students, because a lot of us are non-traditional because we haven't had perfect little sheltered lives where we've just lived with tutors and little academic hidey holes. We've had lives where we were out working and doing and seeing and traveling and maybe not able to commit to school as well as we might have wanted to. We've got, you know, dads who are going to school, who are working to support their families. We've got single moms who are going to school, going to night school and taking care of 3 kiddos. So, you know, your non-traditional status can be such a blessing, but if there are negative aspects of it, own it. It's okay. They get it. They're not trying to make you feel bad. They want you there. They want you to be successful. Schools love the non-trads. Embrace your non-trad. It's a beautiful thing. Stand out. So I finished all of my interviews and was very blessed to get into my first choice, which is only about 4 hours from our farm, which is wonderful. I am not living at home, which that would be a scary commute. They have apartments right near campus. So I'm able to live here on campus. My husband kind of does the back and forth thing. Our boys are now off at college. My one son, who has autism, is living with me, and he's going to the local community college and studying medical assisting. So he's going to be a medical assistant, but he doesn't want to work with me. So he's made that abundantly clear, which is okay. That's it. He needs to do his own thing. I respect that. We're all good. So yeah, so I just finished my first year. I was kind of scared. I told my husband when I started, I said, I feel like I'm going to be that girl in all the high school movies that walks into the cafeteria with her tray and no one will sit with her. So she like eats alone in the bathroom stall. I thought it would be weird being old enough to be everybody's mom, which I am. It's never been weird. It's never been weird. I think medical school is just, it's such a unique and insular experience that we're all kind of veterans from the same war. You know, when you've gone through all of the same exams, when you've gone through all of the hours, when you've gone through, you know, 5 hours together in anatomy lab, when you've gone through 8 hours together studying on the weekend, it's such a bond. And I've never once felt like I'm the old one here. I'm like, I've always been just Jen, and no one has ever treated me any different. So I think that's another thing to really stress for a lot of non-traditional students too, is that the non-traditional aspect of whoever you are pretty much ends when you get to medical school. Once you walk through those doors, you sit down in orientation, you get your badge with your very awkward looking white coat photo on it. All the differences end. We're all pretty unified in there. And all the people that I've talked to that were like, oh, I was so different because I was this, or I was so different because we're not. No, not once we're there. And I can only speak to my school, but it really is just a big crazy family, and it's been such a wonderful experience for me. And honestly, I've never felt younger. I think it's just being surrounded by all these 25-year-olds. It's great.
So if you guys have any questions, type away your questions so we could ask them. And if nobody has questions, I'm sure Jen has better things to do than But yeah, just ask your questions, because I know I mean, there was a bunch of questions that were asked at our registration. We have people that ask questions, and so type in some of their questions. So we'll pull some of them, but since you guys are here, um, just type away your questions, and Trinity and Giselle will ask you, and then I'll look at the other questions. So
The first one that's come up is, did you apply to any MD schools?
Yeah. I did, but I knew that DO was where I wanted to go. But there were some that were kind of in my general area that I kind of blanketed as well. But my background, was kind of in more holistic type of medicine. I had, taken nutrition classes, and I'd taken a lot of studies in healing modalities of different cultures. So I loved the DO piece that was very holistic. I enjoyed the real hands-on aspect of DO. And I also worked with a DO, and he was just such an absolute delight that I just couldn't see myself as being anything but DO. There was something about it that just really spoke to me.
then, can you talk a little bit about the difference between DO and MD, because a lot of people may not know it?
Yeah, that's the big one. And it's funny, because if you talk about a doctor of osteopathic medicine in a lot of the British Commonwealth countries, so if you're in England and you Google it, it's a chiropractor, which is not what we are. We are fully licensed doctors. We have all the same rights and privileges, all the same training as MDs. We just actually receive additional training in osteopathic medicine, which is a lot more of a hands-on type of training. Some people call it manipulation. It's more of a way to diagnose different dysfunctions in the spine and in the body and in the tissues through touch. So we learn all of the MD protocol, but we also receive additional training in osteopathic techniques.
Yeah, and the only thing that I'm just going to add to this is that there is no restriction with being a DO. I actually know a DO who's a neurosurgeon at UC Davis, which is an MD school. He's a professor, he's an assistant professor there. There is no restriction, so you could be a brain surgeon if you want. You could be a family doctor. Everybody thinks that DOs are only family medicine. They're not ER. Actually,
No.
one of the better doctors that I've worked with in the ER is a DO, and he's also on faculty at UCSF. So you could be anywhere, and there's no restriction on your license. You could prescribe drugs and do procedures, and but it's just a very, it's a different approach to how you practice in terms of the osteopathic or the OMM. And if you ever had shoulder pain or back pain, like it's awesome. I've been manipulated on a few times, and
Yeah.
I loved
Yeah.
it. It was like, it was a good, I really liked it. So yeah, so there's no, I mean, and so there's also this question of prestige, and I personally, like, I say maybe keyboard warriors who've never done anything may say stuff like that on social media, but in terms of in the hospital practicing patients, most patients can't even tell the difference between a PA and an MD. So I don't know if they could, so I think it's just the things that, now we're not going to lie that DO schools have different admission criteria that MD schools don't have, and they look at very differently an applicant. So, but yeah, I mean, the people that have never done it are probably the only ones that like to say, "Oh, it's less prestigious," or all of this stuff. But
it's always the people on social media who are like, DOs are inferior to MDs. And then where did you go to medical school? I didn't. And I'm like, "Mm." And then all my MD friends immediately jump in and they're like, half the people I work with are DOs. Like, dude, you were probably in the emergency room being treated by a DO and you didn't even know. Like, just
Yeah.
so, I feel like it's funny, the whole stigma thing. People, I hear people like, oh, do MDs look down at you? And I'm like, no, not at all. That's never been my experience. To me, the only people, like you said, who make the comments are people who have never gone to medical school and they don't even work in the healthcare field. Like every nurse, every MA, every respiratory therapist, every medical professional I've ever known, they don't see the difference.
Yeah, I've worked at level 1 trauma centers, academic level 1 trauma centers at the University of California. And we've had residents that have gone through that are DOs. Nobody looks at them differently. Matter of fact, like I said, a lot of our downtimes, we've had some of our DO people do manipulation on us for free.
Nice.
There are doctors, there are DOs that do like family medicine or have incorporate that into their practice. So you get that extra, I think, like 15, 20 minutes if they want to do part of their practice, but and you could do that and you don't. And I know DOs that literally the day they finish school, they don't do
Never
any
use
of
it again.
their OMM.
Yeah.
So
It really varies from practitioner to practitioner, but like you were saying, there's no restrictions. This last year at graduation, we had quite a few graduates who matched into OBGYN and into emergency medicine. We had a lot in emergency medicine this year, a lot into internal medicine. A good friend of mine just matched into anesthesiology at Mayo. And so there are no restrictions.
yeah, so we just kind of want to put that in bed. I know that we've had a lot of MD schools that come and talk, and we have some DO schools that are coming, but like I said, there is no difference in how you practice. And I guess the only thing that I've heard is people say, oh, DOs are less prestigious, or it's like, well, I don't know, where'd you go to med school, or what kind of doctor are
Exactly.
you, or like how are you an authority on this? And frankly, that's, pardon my French, but it's just a bunch of bull.
Oh yeah, 100%. And when I see stuff like that, I usually just kind of look at it and go, consider the source and delete.
Yeah. So we have a bunch of other questions, but I kind of wanted to bring that up
Yeah.
because it was a good segue to that.
Right, another question we have is, did you ever consider taking a post-bac?
I didn't do a post-bac. I mean, I had 2 master's degrees already, so that kind of knocked those out, as it were. So I didn't really do a post-bac. I had those degrees, and then just did the prereqs online. So that kind of knocked everything out that way.
Yeah, the clarification, she did do a post-bac, but she did it on her own. It was not a formal post-bac.
Yeah, it wasn't a formal, like, I know a lot of people, they've done what they call bridge programs. A lot of medical schools offer a bridge program, which is like a 1 to 2 year Master of Medical Sciences. And that can be a fantastic program for a lot of people. A lot of folks will do those to help get their prereqs done, as well as receiving MCAT prep, which is generally embedded in those programs. And a lot of universities will offer a 1 to 2 year bridge. That is a step directly into the medical school, kind of the understanding that if you finish this program with thus and such GPA and thus and such MCAT, you're a direct admission into next year's class. So, and that varies from school to school. Some you're not guaranteed, but it is a good step up. But some schools will give you a direct line in through their, we call them the MAMS programs, the Masters of Medical Sciences programs.
Yeah, those are great programs. The only other thing you have to consider, they're very expensive and you don't get financial aid. So I know that this is like one thing I've heard quite a bit from undergrads. Oh, I'm not going to do well. I'm just going to do a master's or special master's or post-bac. And those are great programs, but they're very expensive. So, so, and you can't get financial aid because they're non-degree granting. And so you're going to be taking out a lot of private loans, and it can get expensive. But some people just don't have that choice, or if you're not disciplined. I personally don't know Jen personally, but just interaction that I've had with her, she's a highly motivated person. So I don't think I don't, so if you're one of those people that are not like self-motivated or self-starters or MacGyverish type of thing, then those are probably like my friend was going to speak in a few weeks. He did a formal post back because he felt like he was not mature enough to be on his own and do that. And that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with that, but just have all the information.
The next question is, how did you get acclimated to the heavy study schedule when you started medical school? Any advice?
A lot of caffeine. Yeah, coffee is your new bestie. Honestly, I kind of was already, like you said, pretty highly motivated. A lot of it too is there were a lot of years there where I was a single mom with two little kiddos under the age of 8, working 2 jobs and going to night school. So I've not had much time in the last 14 years where I didn't have to be handling a big load of work in one form or another. Honestly, I think the hardest part for me with school was transitioning, because I do work from home. So I'm able to like get up and walk around a lot. And we live on a farm. So I'm constantly like running around and like digging holes and all the other fun stuff you do on a farm. I wasn't used to sitting as much as you do. You sit so much. Like so much. I mean, that was the hardest part for me to get used to, is having to sit still in one place, because I'm a super high energy person and that just makes me loopy. I have a lot of trouble with that. But the studying piece, honestly, and I always say this to people, because I have people who say like, oh, I'm not smart enough to go to medical school. And I'm like, I don't really think intelligence is that much of it, because we don't learn anything that y'all can't learn. You can learn it. I think the hardest part is there's just so much of it coming at you at once. They always use the analogy of it's like trying to drink from a fire hose. It's just constant coming at you. So I think it's just learning to find that balance to where you can handle the workload and still, and I hate this phrase, practice self-care, because I always love to say practice self-care, and you're like, when? Because really when? But just remember, self-care doesn't have to be 2 hours of yoga and a massage. Sometimes self-care is just like eating something for breakfast other than a bag of sweet tarts in the shower. Like just baby steps. Baby steps. That's a beautiful thing. But seek out resources. Your classmates are your best resource. Your classmates are amazing. And if you have an incredible class like I have that is so collaborative, nobody's going to be gatekeeping the resources. You know, there's good people there. Bug your professors. That's what they're there for. That's what they're getting paid for. They don't have to teach. They do it because they love it. So let them do it. Ask them for help if you're struggling, and you will be struggling. And I guess my other bit of advice would be to just surrender the fantasy that you will ever be caught up, because you won't. I remember at orientation, one of our professors said, you start classes on Monday, and Monday at noon will be the last time you were ever caught up. And we're all like, oh, no, because I'm so awesome and I've got this organization and I've got my own key and I'm going to be, yeah, no. I'd say by 2 o'clock, I was already behind. And you're always going to be behind. You always will be behind. You'll be cramming for a cardio exam and getting behind in anatomy. And then you're trying to catch up on anatomy, and then you're going to fall behind in respiratory. It is what it is. Give yourself some grace. You're not superhuman. Give yourself some grace. Understand they know you're behind. They know you're behind. Don't even try to fake it. You know, just surrender the fantasy that you will ever be caught up. Just take care of yourself. Make sure you do get some sleep. Pulling all-nighters, that might have worked when you were like 19 and in college. Yeah, y'all, that will not work in med school. You need to sleep. You need to sleep. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Fuel yourself accordingly. Drink water, eat real food. Caffeine is not food. I love me some coffee. It is not a food girl. You need to eat. You need to sleep. It's very, very important. You will get real run down real fast if you aren't taking care of yourself.
I know. And I also think that after raising two kids, working two jobs, one of your kids, like Mexico's a vacation.
I know. Said to
Like
my
that,
husband one time, I'm
you
like,
working on the yard, it's like, that's all you have to do. You're like, shoot, this is like,
especially when he's got the kids out of town or they're off at college, and I come home to this empty apartment and I'm like, hey, I kind of like this. It's just me and my cat,
this is vacation.
right?
Another question we have you experienced ageism? If so, how did you deal with it?
Honestly, only one time. Well, it's kind of funny though. Like sometimes in class, like my classmates will say something. They're like, "What do we do when we're working with an elderly patient, like someone who's 55?" And I'm like, and the rest of the class just kind of looks at me and they're like, "She's gonna kill you. She's gonna kill you." So there's a perspective shift there. But I think the only time I ever experienced overt ageism was when I was talking to a different university. And I was chatting with one of the women there, and she said, how old are you? And I said, I'm sorry. And she said, how old are you? Because honestly, I think your age is probably going to keep you out of a lot of schools. I know it'll keep you out of ours. And I just, again, this was all on Zoom. And I just said, oh my, do you realize how illegal that statement was that you just made? And then I just smiled at her and she just was like, well, I mean, it's a valid. And I said, oh no, incredibly illegal. You can't ask me that. Okay. But you have a nice day. And I just ended the Zoom. But yeah, no, very illegal, FYI. So no, they cannot ask you how old you are. They cannot ask you picture in your mind anything that would make you go, excuse me, and it's probably illegal. Women, they cannot ask you if you're married or if you're planning on having children. None of their business. So that was the only time I ever experienced overt ageism. Other than that, I've never really felt it from anyone at my school. Like I said, I'm just Jen. And like all of my friends that I hang out with are like 26, 27, and like, I remember I was laughing with one of my friends one time. I'm like, is it weird that because I'm a year older than her mom. I'm like, is it weird that, and she's like, no, you're just like my highly inappropriate friend that I like hanging out with. And I'm like, cool. So, I mean, nobody really seems to notice. The only time I get ageism is from strangers on the internet, but I always,
Keyboard warriors.
keyboard warriors. Well, I always tell my husband too, like, I'm going to put together a list of the things I hear most often. My favorite one is, you'll be dead before you finish residency. Apparently the life expectancy has dropped in the United States to like 57. So who knew? I get that one a lot. I get good luck paying back your student loans, grandma. I get that one a lot. And my personal favorite, my favorite one, my husband loves this one too. You stole somebody's spot that could have practiced a lot longer than you. You stole their spot. I get that one a lot too. That one's a fun one. And I usually respond by saying, I think you misspelled earned, because I earned my spot. So if you want to find someone else who has my experience and did the work and they want to come and earn their spot, they're welcome to earn their spot. There's more opening up every year, but I earned mine. So,
But the thing is that like you experienced sexism and all the isms growing up, so ageism is just, and I think like, I mean, I think life in general, you're gonna, and this is not like, I personally don't give a flying F about people on social media, because everybody's a keyword warrior on social media, but in life you're gonna deal with the isms, and it's not so much that, and I think that's just for anybody, you're gonna deal with racism, sexism, ageism, every ism that you could find, and that's what the world is. And it's not the world that we want to be, but it's the world that it is, and you're just going to have to adjust to it and know how to handle it. Because yes, it's upsetting, but you also can't like tell somebody off, you can't hit them, you can't do any of that stuff. You just deal with it, because and and there's also the microaggression, the people that don't verbalize it, and they will do things to do that, and you just have to deal with it. It's not a perfect world, and there are good people in everywhere, and there's bad people in everywhere, and you just deal with it. I personally, my thing that I always tell people. There's like 5 or 6 people's opinion in the world that I care about, and outside of those 5 or 6 people, don't give a hoot. Nobody's paying my bills. They're not
That's
paying my bills. You're
that's what my
not.
husband always
Yeah.
said. If they're not paying your rent or signing your paycheck,
Yeah. Yep. You're not. Well, signing a paycheck, you earn that paycheck.
yeah, well,
They're not giving it to you. They're not giving it to you as a favor. They're like, it's like you're my boss. Like, like I remember one of my managers one time said, it goes, "Oh, well, like you got your check or whatever." I'm like, no, I earn my check. I show up, you tell me the job that I have to do. So it's not like you're not giving me free money. If you give me free money, then sure. But so nobody's, so if they're unless they're paying your bills and stuff like that. And I understand, like and Jen's been very fortunate, but I'm sure there's people in your family that, and that's the hard part. And I don't know how to answer that because, so have you faced any of that ageism or anything in your own family? Like
not
outside of
not
your husband or children?
no, not in my family at all. My parents were ecstatic. They were so I thought, my parents are gonna think I'm crazy when I tell them, and they were just like, "That's so cool." And my mom's like, "I want to buy you a really neat stethoscope." And they thought it was just the coolest thing. And my family has been just so excited and so supportive and just my biggest cheerleaders, and they're like, do it, come on, do it. And my dad was so funny. He's like, my father is in his 80s and he has Parkinson's, and he's like, "Well, it looks like I can't die quite yet. I gotta see you graduate." Like, great. That wasn't where you were planning on it, so thanks for holding off for me. He's a character. But no, my family's been so great. My kids they just think it's so cool. I kind of was like, "I think it's weird that your mom's like that." "No, that's so awesome, Mom. Go for it." So yeah, no, my whole family's been super, super supportive. But I mean, my family's just like that. Like if I had said, "I'm going to shave my head and join the circus," my mom would have been like, "Oh, honey, that's so wonderful. I'm going to buy you your own trapeze." Like, I mean, that's just, my family's just like that. Like anything I said I was going to do, they'd be like, "That's awesome. Do it," So I'm very blessed in that respect. Very, very blessed. But no, like the only ageism I get, like I said, is from strangers on the internet. And I always tell my husband, like the only 2 opinions matter in my life, and that's the man upstairs and the man in the mirror. If I feel like I'm right with my higher power and I like who I see in the mirror, then we're good. And other people's opinions of me are none of my business. They can think and see and do whatever they want. As long as I can wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and be happy with the person looking back at me, and we're good.
Very cool. We have a bunch of other questions, the ladies.
The next question is, when applying with 7 transcripts, does it take a long time for the AAMC to verify the classes and institutions?
Yeah, it took a hot minute, not gonna lie. Schools don't really care if you have a lot of transcripts, but yeah, it does take AAMC a while to do it just because there are so many. So just, again, always make sure it's like that, vote early and vote often. Apply early. Always good to get your application in as early as possible, because there's always going to be blips. You're going to have that, or they're going to say, "Oh, well, we lost your letter of recommendation," or yada, yada, yada. There's always going to be blips you have. I had one letter of recommendation. They were like, "It's stamped, but it isn't signed." And so we had to kind of go back around with that. So yeah, it'll take them a while to verify all of them. So just make sure you get all of your stuff in as soon as possible, because there's always going to be something, even if you think you've got everything in order, that they're going to make you resubmit. So
Next question is, does professional life cover up any of the bad grades of college?
unfortunately, no. They still want you to take care of those grades. I would say that if you have a lot more professional experience in the field, they will be more lenient with a GPA. I would say if you have someone who's coming straight out of undergrad, never having worked, all they did was undergrad and they focused on that, and they're 22 years old, ink still wet on their degree, and they have a low GPA, they're not going to cut them a lot of slack, because that was your job for 4 years. Whereas if you have someone that did an undergrad and then worked and did research, or you have, like I said, someone who was, working 2 jobs and going to school and taking care of kids and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they're going to cut them a lot more grace. Absolutely. And people who have experience working in some sort of a research or a healthcare background. We've got a lot of folks who come into med school after working for years as a nurse or as an MA. A CRNA, you get a lot of people that come in through that route, and they'll give you a little more grace on the GPA. But the GPA, it just, y'all, it is what it is. It's most schools, though they don't like to talk about it, they do have a minimum cutoff at some point. So, if you have a certain grade that you're really upset about, look into retaking the class. We also talked about post-bac, because they'll average in a lot of graduate grades in there as well that can kind of pull your GPA back up where it needs to be. Taking additional coursework can help boost that grade up a little bit. So it's not the end of the world if you bomb a few classes, because we've all bombed a few classes. It happens. It's all good. I had way too much fun my freshman year of college. So I had a really good time, and my grades reflect it. But they were also understanding of the fact that that was like 1989. It was kind of funny because during my interview, the guy who's interviewing me from the school that I'm now attending, he's hilarious. And he was trying to be all like bad cop in my interview. And he's like, so I see you got a C in this chemistry class in college. What were you doing? And I was like, well, it was 1989, so probably ratting my hair and listening to REO Speedwagon. Like, I don't know, it was the 80s. What do you think I was doing? And he just cracked up because he's my age, and he's like, oh yeah, I love that band. And that. So, yeah, I mean, if you've had a lot of gap years in there and you've been working, they're going to cut you a lot more grace on stuff like that. So it's very situation dependent. But I would say that if your undergrad GPA is very low, look into a post-bac of some kind to get that GPA back up. They like to see upward trends. So if you've got real low grades starting out, but they see improvement and your graduate grades are, they like that. They like to see growth and development.
The next questions are sort of grouped together. So how long did you study for the MCAT, and did you study at school or at home?
I studied for 4 months, and I either studied at home, but then that was when the wildfires were going on. And it was so smoky on the West Coast. And we were like, we can't do this. So we got in our school bus and decided to just start driving east. And we wound up in Maine. We went from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine. It was awesome. So that was where I studied for the MCAT, was on the back of a school bus driving across the country, which is like probably not ideal for a lot of people. But it was, I don't know, I figured studying on a school bus seemed to make sense. It was appropriate. So that was a rather unique situation. But yeah, that's where I studied for the MCAT, was in a school bus at a lot of KOA campgrounds across the country.
Next question is it necessary to have volunteer experience in the medical field to stand out in an application, or is any kind of work helpful?
They're going to want to know that you have some kind of a medical, clinical, or research background. I did not have medical, but I had research. And that was a big thing they asked too, was your research just sitting looking at journal articles, or were you actually working with families? And I was very hands-on working with kiddos, working with families. So that was able to work in there. I did some shadowing. I did some physician shadowing, but you don't have to be an ex-nurse. You don't have to be a phlebotomist or an MA. Just show that you have some kind of hands-on work working with people. We have one guy who's in our class, and he was a massage therapist, and he initially worked at a spa, but then he started working at a doctor's office doing massage therapy. And that was when he got the passion for medicine. So just show that you do have experience working with people. Hospice is another great way to get experience. Substance abuse treatment centers, that's a great place where you can go contact them, and most of them have physicians and medical staff, and you can go work out there. There's a lot of opportunities to work with people. So as long as you have some experience working with people, working with the community, and that you do have some knowledge, even if it's just shadowing, you've got to have some knowledge of what physicians do, because what you're getting into is huge. I would be lying if I didn't say that medical school and the practice of medicine won't engulf your life, because it will. So they want to make darn sure you know what you're getting into.
The next question is, since you have a nutrition background, what is the best brain foods snack or smoothie?
I make the same smoothie every single morning. So I don't know if it's the best, but it's what absolutely works for me. I use a lot of organic greens from our farm. We have greens growing year round, either in the ground or in the greenhouse. So it's a combination of spinach, kale, chard, cilantro, and usually some beet tops. I love beet tops. So I will do that with a lot of blueberries. We have over 100 blueberry bushes, so we've always got frozen blueberries. So a lot of greens, a lot of blueberries. I use oat milk and kind of just whatever fruit I've got lying around. But I always add turmeric because it's a really, really good anti-inflammatory, which is just kind of great for staving off disease, but it's also good for just all the sore muscles and whatnot you're going to get from sitting on your butt or standing on your feet for 5 hours in a lab. So yeah, a lot of greens, a lot of blueberries, and fish oil. I'm a big believer in fish oil. Fish oil is a beautiful thing.
All right, next question. Were you asked age-specific related questions when you were interviewed for med school?
You know, just the one from that one woman who told me I was too old to go to her school, which is funny because I looked at her and I was like, you're like 15 years older than I am. Like, what in the world is happening here? Like, this is insane. No, that was the only one that was just like right in my face where I was like, wow, that was super cringy and awkward. During my interview, like I said, with the one professor who interviewed me for the school where I'm now attending, and I absolutely adore him. He's like my favorite professor. The only thing I think was even slightly age-ish related was he found out where I grew up, and he was like, did you know so-and-so? Did you know so-and-so? We were like talking about all these people we knew in common. And then this woman that I worked for at the Autism Research Institute, he's like, so did you ever do any work with so-and-so at the local university? And I'm like, yeah, she was one of my mentors. And he's like, oh my gosh, we used to play racquetball together. So I think that was like the only kind of age-ish type thing, was that I had kind of more of, I feel like it was very easy for me to interview. It was very easy for me to interview because the people interviewing me were all my age. So like a lot of the stuff where they try to be like, oh, I'm going to try to intimidate you. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not. Don't even try. Like, dude, no. So I think very quickly my interviews would go from them, my interviewers trying to be all stern, to them just being like, oh, I remember that band. And I'm like, yeah, that band from the 80s. And like, so it was absolutely an asset rather than a detriment.
Another question is, how many classes did you take at one time while you were completing your med school prerequisites?
You know, it probably 2 to 3 at a time. It sort of depended on what we had going on. A lot of it was, you know, being on a farm, it depended on the time of year. When we're in kind of planting and harvesting season, it was like no more than 2 because we were busy. And then also we were homeschooling. So kind of as my kids were getting ready to graduate and take the SATs, when mom and home stuff got in the way, it was 2 classes. When I had a little more time on my hands, it was 3 to 4. So just kind of balancing it around life. And we have really bad internet where we live out at the coast too. Like we're at my apartment right now near school. So it's like the internet is fire right here. But where we live, it's because we live right on the coast. So it's like an ocean wave goes like this and the internet shuts off for like 20 minutes. So that made things a little challenging taking prerequisites online, because it's like you're right in the middle of something. I'm like, and halfway through my exam, my internet died. So
Yeah, I put some links on there about the MCAT school, the med school coach MCAT director gave 2 talks, and then the videos. Also another place that's really good that I know a few people have done this is ASU Online, where they have like a pretty neat thing that you can take all your classes in online, and then you fly in for like 2 weeks to do all the labs.
Yeah.
And so that's like an option because some schools don't accept, well, this is pre-COVID, and I think at some point post-COVID they're going to revert back, is they don't take online lab courses.
Mm.
So I think that online learning is like post-COVID is here to stay, but there may be some things with labs and stuff that you may need to do in person. And so
Yeah,
as
there are a couple where you will have to go do in person, but
any other questions?
I have another one. What do you see your like future in practice like looking like once you're done med school?
well, having moved from a city to a rural community and seeing firsthand the challenges that families face in rural communities. You know, a lot of these families have to travel over an hour just to get to a primary care physician, and to see a specialist, it's 4 hours away, 3 to 4 hours away. I just really got the passion for working in rural and underserved areas. So I definitely would like to work in rural communities. And honestly, my specialty, I change my mind every 10 minutes. I'm trying to just, I keep telling myself, like, I went in going, I know exactly what I want to do. And then it was like, oh, but OBGYN. Then it was like, oh, but psych. I love psych. And then it was like, oh, but emergency med. You know, so I change my mind constantly because the first 2 years you're getting everything thrown at you. So I just keep telling myself that my goal is to just keep a very, very open mind going into rotations, because I've heard from so many third years that said I went into rotations knowing exactly what I wanted to do. And then they did a rotation that they just fell in love with and they couldn't imagine doing anything but that. So I'm trying to just really keep an open mind with that. I've always known I wanted to teach. I love, you know, a lot of what I did in research and was a lot of presenting and a lot of public speaking. A lot of my advocacy work involved, you know, running seminars, doing a lot of public speaking, and I love that. I absolutely love it. So I've always kind of in the back of my head said, in addition to my practice or post my practice, I would very much like to be an educator as well. So working at a university or medical school.
My other question is, when you were going through the application process, what some of the tips that you would have for non-traditional students to talk about their experiences in life?
Yeah, like I said, focus on the thing that makes you non-traditional. Don't try to hide it. Don't think that I think non-traditional has gotten such a bad rap. I don't even, maybe it's the non piece that just seems so negative, like you're non-traditional, you're not this. And gosh, I think it's such an asset. It was my favorite people that I've met that were non-traditional students of some sort. And focus on it. Write about your experiences, write about, you know, your struggles. They love to see that. Write about the things that make you different. I keep thinking of all my friends and some of their great stories, you know, being a yoga teacher in Ecuador, being a Disney princess, you know, someone else sang on a cruise ship for a while. Think of it. What are the things that make you interesting? What are the things that make you unique? What are the things that make you stand out? Because you have to stand out. You have to. I mean, like I said, it's great if you've got a really good grades and you've got a really good MCAT, and that's awesome. But so do all of these people. You've got to have something that makes you special. You need to make sure they remember you. Go into the interview and go into the application process when you're writing your personal statement thinking, I want them at the end of the day when they read my statement to go, when they see your name again, to go, oh, I remember Trinity. She was the one who, you know, oh my gosh, I remember Giselle. She told that story about. So, you know, have something that makes you stick in their minds, because you're going to have to stick in their minds. You're going to have to. Applications are at an all-time high. Someone told me that it's called, they call it like the Fauci syndrome. He sort of like made it cool to be in healthcare again. And a lot of folks post-COVID, I mean, medical school applications went way up. So you've got to have that something that makes you stand out. They've got to spot you. I did a lot of community theater when I was a kid, and it was always that thing, you know, wear the bright shirt to the audition, you know, sing the funny song, you know, you've got all these people auditioning, and your application, that's your audition. It is 100% your audition. So make it memorable, make it stand out. Please don't say you want to be a doctor because you want to help people. I'm just going to say that. Please don't say that. Don't ever say that. You've got to have something more than that. We all want to help people, and there are a lot of ways you can do that aren't as expensive and don't take as long. So you've got to have a really good reason. And I always, there's a quote by Nietzsche who just said, if you have a strong enough why, you can handle any how. So if you have a strong enough reason why you want to go to medical school, you can handle the how. You can handle the work, you can handle the applications, you can handle the interviews, you can handle all of those hows that it's going to take to get you there if you have a strong enough why. And that's a big thing too. Ask yourself why you want to go to medical school. And if your answer is because my mom and dad want me to, or if your answer is because I want to make a lot of money, I mean, that's honest, but again, there's ways to do that are less expensive and that don't take as long. I mean, honestly, if your answer is anything other than when I close my eyes and picture my future, I can't imagine being anything but a doctor. Think about it long and hard, because it is expensive to go to medical school. It's expensive to apply to medical school. I mean, y'all have seen how much it costs to register for the exams and all the application fees and the primaries and the secondaries, and it's not cheap. So have a really good why and share that in your application, share that in your interviews.
I have another question. Do you recommend to be competitive applicant to wait until you're 50 and apply? This is a joke. This is a joke I like to bring up because a lot of people, I've seen a lot of pre-meds do this, and then also, you know, like, oh, this person did this and they were successful, so I'm going to try to replicate that. So even though there's nothing wrong with waiting until you're 50, like, that's not a good reason to. No. It's probably not ideal for a lot of people. Some of my friends think I'm crazy. They're like, your kids are going off to college now. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, so don't you want to relax? And I'm like, I'm weird though. I saw a TikTok one time and the gal was like, a fun fact about me is I've never been relaxed. And I'm like, yeah, no, fully relate. Like, for me, I'll say like, oh, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to veg. I'll sit down and I'll watch like 20 minutes of Law and Order. And I'm like, okay, now I need to go do something. I have to be doing something, or I just get squirrely. So for me, this was the perfect time. And if I did nothing but just kind of sit around after my kids were graduated, I think I'd drive my husband up the wall. What kind of work does he do?
He's an inventory manager for an organic food company. So yeah, so he gets to work from home, which is nice. I get my best friend and we get to work from home together side by side with our little laptops, and it's pretty wonderful. And it also allows him to kind of go back and forth from our farm and then up here with me. So yeah, it gives us a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility working online. So that's really nice.
Does anybody have any more questions? Anyone?
I think my husband's online right now in the other room, actually.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Anyone?
Anyone?
They said question, you met a CRNA and nurses who went to medical school?
Mm-hmm. One of the women in my class, she's amazing. She was an ER nurse for, oh gosh, 10 years, I think she told me. Anyway, wow, has she ever got some stories, as you can imagine. So yeah, we've had a lot of people who are in different fields in there. We had one person who was an occupational therapist, and we've had MAs. One gal who was an ultrasound tech. So yeah, well, you get a lot of people from different fields and different branches of healthcare that will transition to another field at some point in their career. So it's really fun. I love going to school with nurses because they give such a unique perspective to the healthcare experience. And I mean, I think our ex-nurses are going to be amazing physicians. I think they're going to be absolutely incredible. And because they do have that wonderful perspective of what it's like to, be bedside for X number of hours a day and do a lot of the work down in the trenches. And I'm excited to see where they wind up. I really am. I asked her if she wanted to do emergency medicine. She's like, no, more than enough of that over the years. I'm good. So she's seen more than enough ERs in her time. She's looking for something a little more zen, I think.
Yeah, we actually on July 6th we have a nurse who went to med school and now is an orthopedic resident, and she was actually an ER nurse too, and was in the army, but she is now a orthopedic resident, second-year orthopedic resident. So if you're a nurse, you can talk to her. She has some pretty insightful things. Any other questions? Anyone? There was a question that was posted, but I think you answered it with just about experiences and ageism, and I think we've covered that. Anyone else have any questions? Are we gonna let Jen go? Get in trouble with, doing something. Anyone? And then you said, the other thing is you said you were doing some research too, and like, how is that differently done in med school than in undergraduate?
A lot more opportunities, which is really wonderful. If you can get some research experience in medical school, I think it's fantastic. I had a research background, so I'm pretty excited about it. Was really eager to get back into it. A lot of schools, ours included, will post different research opportunities on a website that tell you different projects that different physicians, scientists, different faculty members have kind of cooking, and see if you want to meet with them to see if you're a good fit. What I did, which also works really well, just find a professor that you really, really like, who works in and or teaches in a field that you're passionate about, and just go to them directly and sit down and say, I am really passionate about pediatric cardiology, or, oh my gosh, I loved your lecture you did about the renal system in relation to blank, blank, blank. Are you doing any research around that? I would love to be a part of your research. So even if you don't see something posted or they don't explicitly state it, your faculty is always working on research. They've always got something going. So find a faculty member you really, really like and just show up in their office and say, I want to work with you. I'm really passionate about this. Do you have any research around it? That's how I found my first research project. And then my other one, I just had a professor grab me in the hall and said, you have a degree in nutrition. I'm like, right. And he's like, come with me. We're working on a project. So he just like grabbed me and like, I need someone who knows nutrition. So that's a lot of times too, just sort of your background, people will kind of seek you out. But yeah, just be aggressive. Just walk up and sit in their office and say, I want to work with you. If you have any research projects, put me in, coach. It's a great way to get your feet wet.
The other thing, there's actually two questions that I found. And one of them was, how do you find, as an older student, how do you find mentors that are in your, I guess, I don't understand that question myself, but like, they're maybe younger than you or older than you, and how do you find like mentors? And then the other second question was, what about taking directions from someone that's younger than you?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that
those
doesn't
are-
bother me at all. I've had a lot of people ask me that. They're like, what are you gonna do if you like go in and you get some like 28-year-old attending who's snapping at you? And I'm like, I probably will get a 28-year-old attending snapping at me. I hope I do, because you know that attending is going to be snapping at all of the other residents. And honestly, it would really upset me if they didn't snap at me. That would feel like ageism to me. Like, no, you're just treat me like everybody else, and I don't have a problem with that. I've never had a problem with that. I always kind of joke my kid's physician, and I'm always like, oh, Dr. So-and-so. And she's like, Jen, no, just call me by my first name. And I'm like, physically incapable of doing that. I cannot do it. Not how I was raised. I'm like, I don't care that you're almost young enough to be my daughter. You are a doctor. I am not. You are Dr. Blank. And that's how it's going to be. And yeah, I've never really had an issue with having employers who are younger than me. One of the people I'm working on a research project with, she's very young. She's extremely brilliant. I'm learning so much from her. There's a lot of very young people who have a lot of very, very powerful knowledge. And there's a lot of people my age that do and a lot who don't. And so, I think age doesn't always equal wisdom. And I think there's wisdom to be found in all ages and all backgrounds and all experiences. And for me, I seek out mentors based on people who are kind of passionate about the same things I am. Like I see something and I'm like, I'm really passionate about this. I want to learn more about this. Who's already working in that field? And then whoever that person is, regardless of age or gender or blank, 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 someone who's got experience and knowledge and expertise in that field, that's a natural mentor to me.
Yeah, I guess one of the quotes that I've heard about being a leader is you first have to be coachable, mendable, taughtable, being
Yes.
taught, learn, and then follower, and then you become a leader. So you don't get it all. Like age doesn't make you smarter or more knowledgeable or an expert.
I walked into first year just like every other first year student. I was a dumbass. I walked in like the rest of them. We all walked in there like, I know nothing. So, it's a fresh start. It was a clean slate for all of us, regardless of background. We all walked in with a pretty clean slate and we all started from square one. So.
Yeah. Well, we're going to let you go. I don't think we have any other questions. Just a lot of comments about thanking you and somebody saying that they thought med school was too late for them. And so, well, thank you. So thank you again for joining us. Thanks everyone for coming, and see you next week where we have, what's next week? We have, Vanessa is one of our board members. She's going to talk about selecting the best pre-med opportunities. And she's actually just started Stanford Med School this week, although she ran out of power. She's like her first week of school, they ran out of power. So I'm like, maybe somebody at Stanford didn't pay their electrical bill.